I hope that I can maybe shed a little bit of light or pique your interest on just one picture. And maybe you'll take a few minutes and wander over to the Ancock's Chambers wing and do the really important thing, which is actually look at it yourselves. Because I always liked a professor of mine who said, you know, the works of art don't change, but you do. And so you will bring to the experience of looking at what you look at tonight, you will bring your own personal experiences, the way your day was, the things that are influencing your mind, and will affect what you're seeing. So I prepared a few remarks and slides, and I'm pleased to say that a couple of people helped me with this along the way. One is a gifted young art history undergraduate at Duke named Laura Dickey, and her mom is right here in the front row, just making sure she gets appropriate credit. But go Devils, yeah. So Laura Dickey was really fantastic. And Ashley Holloway in my office, who is off, there's Ashley over there, who is going to be a talented art historian in a couple of years. So both of them helped out. In any case, what we're going to do tonight is spend a few minutes looking at a single object that has within its life, and it is hundreds of years old, within its life we're going to check into its influences, something of its sources, and the way it's navigated through the corridors of art history, but also of political power and artistic power as well. So let's meet our protagonist. And in a way, it's a very unlikely protagonist, isn't it? It's an utterly charming young girl with flaxen hair and an astonishing dress, very passive, but very open, with wonderful blue eyes offsetting the pale skin with a little blush of red in the cheeks, standing there sort of doll-like, but somehow also wise beyond her few years. So you probably have met her, even if you haven't seen the exhibition of Louvre Atlanta, the Kings' Collectors. You would have seen her enormously, 42 feet high and 30 feet wide. You would see her 24 feet high and 20 feet wide. And then soon you'll see her, if you haven't already, at the actual size. Just a little bit more than a yard high, 3 feet and 3.5 feet high, and about 3 feet wide in that wonderful frame. So how did it get here? Let's start with that. This is where she lives normally. She lives exactly where she has lived since the mid-17th century, in the Louvre, then a palace, now a museum. This is David Brenneman, my colleague and director of collections and exhibitions here, and this is the actual gallery in the Louvre that she normally hangs, not against a red wall, but this rather pale wall, other paintings by Velasquez right behind David. And it was really, as Virginia said, the idea of the Louvre Atlanta, the history of the Louvre, that set in motion the question of what are the works of art that can tell the story of the history of the world's greatest art museum. So David, you've already met, and his colleague in Paris, Olivier Millet, curator of Spanish, how appropriate, English, and American art. You know how many American paintings there are in the Louvre? 2. So if you're curator of American paintings at the Louvre, it's very focused as a job. But he's really been a great colleague, and he was really the point person. Olivier was the point person on our project when we created this unique partnership. And it was Olivier who said the history of the Louvre should be the focus of the first year of our partnership. And it was Olivier who said, yes, we can send the Infanta to Atlanta. And it was, of course, Henri Loiret, the director of the Louvre, who we had worked with when he was the director of the Musée d'Orsay, and who, shortly after becoming director of the Louvre, said, we'd love to collaborate with you again, Michael, but can't we do something new and different? Can't we do something that would stretch the boundaries of what a normal exhibition is? And it was this, as you can see, this thoughtful person who was also a kind of adventurer trying to stretch the boundaries of what the roles of museums can be. So that, by and large, is how the Infanta Margarita came to be here with us, and she'll remain until, I think, August or September of this year. So how did the picture come to be in the first place? Well, let's go back 400 years or so. Let's see, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, 400 years. And it's this woman. This woman is Anne of Austria. It was painted by Rubens, which of course is interesting in that Rubens was not only a Flemish artist, but is an artist who painted in the Spanish royal court, and there'll be a lot about Spanish art this evening. This painting is in the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena. She was the wife of Louis XIII, and we're going to have a little bit of genealogy, which I'm just awful about, but maybe you're better than I am. So Anne of Austria, seen here in this rather extraordinary dress with this great starched lace collar, the wife of Louis XIII, and therefore the mother of Louis XIV. Imagine being the mother of the Sun King. Wow. She was also, quite tellingly, the sister of Philip IV of Spain, the father of the Infanta Margarita. So she was the aunt to the little girl in the picture. So it was in 1654 that Anne of Austria commissioned Velasquez in Spain to do 20 paintings of her family, of the Spanish court. Now, of course, this is several hundred years before the invention of photography. So if you want to remember your loved ones, you need to have either a drawn or painted document of them. So of the 20 paintings commissioned by Velasquez, there's only one that remains in the Louvre's collections, the one that's here in Atlanta. Because during the French Revolution, I think it was in 1795, many of the paintings were either destroyed or dispersed through sale or were actually destroyed. And the only exception is the picture that's here. So let me show you Anne of Austria's husband, Louis XIII, by Philippe de Champagne, the uncle of the Infanta and the father of Louis XIV. So just to refresh you can see how my learning disability on genealogy, so I had to, Ashley was kind enough to do this for me. So Louis XIII, married to Anne of Austria. She is the sister of Philip IV, whose second wife was the Queen Mariana. And the couple on the left were the parents of Louis XIV. The couple on the right, the parents of the Infanta Margarita. Now, the part that actually gets beyond me were, and of course, therefore, the Infanta and Louis XIV were cousins. Louis XIV, this is totally great, married Maria Teresa of Spain, the Infanta Margarita's half-sister. So if there are any genealogists out there, you can explain that relationship to me after the talk is over. But Velasquez did other pictures. Let me show you Maria Teresa, the Infanta's half-sister. It was also part of the commission. This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection. Fabulous butterfly-shaped little decorations in her great hairdo here. Also very open-faced, very sweet pink mouth. This is probably a cut-down version of what was probably the same size as of the Infanta's picture. So, here we are. The Infanta Margarita, the first child of Philip IV and Queen Mariana. She was to become the Empress of Austria in her adulthood. And when this picture was painted, she was only 3 years old. So we see her with this marvelous satin dress, a kind of, it goes in a typical Spanish style from sort of oyster-like whites to deeper grays, and of course offset by this great patterns of lace. And then she has these marvelous gold bracelets on both wrists, this necklace with this star-shaped pendant, this interesting sash here, and these wonderful pink or coral-colored decorations. And she holds in her hand a very pale rose-colored flower. Utterly charming. She puts her hand not on the top of a chair the way an adult might, but because she's literally diminutive, she puts it on the seat, and therefore giving you a sense of scale between herself and the object next to her. But let's go a little bit closer and look into those wonderful, limpid, open blue eyes and that little rosebud mouth and the wonderful soft hair with these wispy strands which are sort of loose, flowing right through here. We're looking at the hands, which are so relaxed and so gentle in the way they hold the flowers or the way they're placed on the chair itself. So if you look at a Velasquez painting of one of the popes in a Roman collection, you see someone just on the opposite spectrum of human experience, someone who is so worldly, so accustomed to the corridors of power, so shrewd and complex. And you just think back on the purity and openness of the Infanta Margarita. Now, later on, she married this man, Leopold I. I attribute this to being either an awful painting or an awful slide. I'm not exactly sure which because I haven't seen the actual, but I'll try and get it off the screen as quickly as I can. So she married Leopold I, who was both her uncle and her cousin. So in 1666, she was 14 years old when they married, and he was 26. Just so you don't think that that's completely surprising, it was Marie Antoinette who, the next century, married Louis XVI when she was 14 years of age as well. So it was the Infanta Margarita and her husband had 4 children together, and she was actually the Austrian royal family was keeping track of her from a very early age. This is a painting by Velasquez of the Infanta a year before the painting that's here. So she was 2 years old here. That was the first picture by Velasquez of her. This was done shortly after the, can I call it the Atlanta painting or the Louvre picture? When she was 5 years old. and we'll see her at that age in another picture. And here she is in another fantastic object. It does seem as if she's trapped inside these extraordinary costumes. So here she is 8 years old. I think she peaked rather early, but then again, she didn't know that her life would end really with the birth of the last of her 4 children, and she died in childbirth at age 22. When you look at the picture in the galleries, you really won't be able to see this. It won't appear this way. This was sort of heightened so that you can see that in the 18th century, her name was painted on the top of this picture, as it was with her half-sister over here. So the Infanta Margarita was written there in the 1700s, a full century after the picture was painted. And I should say that the painting actually remained in Louis XIV's private quarters in his dressing room during his reign. So it was an important family portrait. So the gilding was removed, but you can still make out faintly the lettering if you look carefully at the top of the picture. And it kind of reminds us that, works of art are physical objects that things happen to. They have a life. The creation of the object, in a sense, is the beginning of the life, the physical life of the object. So it was only 2 years after the picture that's here was painted. The Infanta Margarita was included as a central figure in what some people would argue is the greatest European painting of all time. Now, that would be an interesting debate. But I think almost anyone would agree that Velasquez's Las Meninas in the Prado Museum is probably in the top 5. I don't know how many people here have seen the picture. Have some of you seen it? And I don't know if you had the same experience that I did. You've seen it reproduced and you studied it. But when you come up to the physicality of it, it is a really big picture. It takes you to another dimension of experience. And what he did was, it's called, Las Meninas, which is the maids of honor, the ladies in waiting over here, these two. But really, who steals the show? It's not the royal family, it's the painter. And look at this. So, I don't know about you, but I love pictures about pictures. Paintings with paintings in them. Not only is this a painting with a number of other paintings in it, as you see here in the back wall, but it's a painting with a big painting that's backwards. So you see the easel and you see the stretcher that's holding up the painting. And you can't help but wonder, what is he painting? Is the painting is really an interesting set of mind tricks. And of course you see the Infanta's parents in the mirror here. So one of the questions is, are we on this side of the painting the subject? Are we standing where the king and queen are standing? And are we the subject of the picture? Or is she the subject of the picture? And of course the dog is fantastic too. And here are 2 dwarfs, the male and the female over here. The chamberlain who is coming down the stairs here, probably having to do with the king and queen's presence. So it's an interesting study of reversibility and complexity. Here's a quote from a scholar. It said, Velasquez made sure that we could not be certain about what he is painting. Is it a portrait of the king and queen for which they are posing, or are they merely visiting as he works? The chamberlain's presence in the doorway behind suggests that they are passing through, as his responsibilities included opening doors before them. So let me just give you a close-up of the king and queen, and there's the Infanta right here. And here's another picture of them as well, both by Velasquez. So you can see in a sense, how the Infanta also is a miniaturized version of her mother. And you can also see, for those of you who are familiar with 19th century French painting, or even Whistler in the late 19th century, how much of Velasquez's palette was adapted by those artists. And then, of course, just returning to that picture, the only known self-portrait of Velasquez is that little piece of Las Meninas. And he wears very proudly on his doublet the Order of Santiago, which he received in 1658. So that's a little bit of the 17th century history of the picture. But it had a very active life in the 19th century as well. And here's what I think is just a fantastic American picture. The Grand Gallery of the Louvre in the distance, the painter and inventor, you know him as the inventor, the sort of Bill Gates of the 19th century, the inventor of Morse code and the telegraph, Samuel F.B. Morse, standing right here, who is a great portrait painter. He's well represented in our collection, helping his daughter to paint. James Fenimore Cooper, standing over here. And what Morse wanted to do was to collect the great paintings in the Louvre to paint a big picture that he'd bring back to the States so that Americans who might never get to Paris could see the European masters. So it was in this setting, the Louvre of the 19th century, which was the great textbook for artists. And it was Cézanne who said, "The Louvre is the book in which we learn to read." The Louvre is the book in which we learn to read. So let me give you a couple of examples in which some pretty well-known artists learned how to read or to paint using the Infanta Margarita. It was literally in front of the Velasquez painting that two young artists met in 1863 because they both wanted to copy it. One of them is named Edward Manet. And you see here this etching of the Infanta, and you also see what he was interested in and what he wasn't interested in. He wasn't interested in the details of the lace. He wasn't interested in the color. He wasn't really interested in these flowers or anything like that. He was sort of interested in the outlines and the shape and the contrasts of the grays and the whites. This is going to be, by the way, this etching is going to be in an Impressionism show that we're hosting in October of this year called Impressionism and the Old Masters. Well, the other artist who Manet met in front of our picture is Edgar Degas. And you see that he too made a print, an etching, based on it. Because at that time, there in fact were only 1, 2, or 3 important Spanish paintings in the entire Louvre Museum. One of them was this picture, and the other, and the other was the Murillo. So here's a drawing on the right by Cézanne after the Murillo boy that is in the exhibition and is also in the Samuel F.B. Morse painting, by the way. So it was that highly revered in the 19th century. So let me go back one. This is a picture on the right by Renoir in which the young girl who, it's not a copy, but I would say it's probably an adaptation. This is from 1864, just 1 year after Manet and Degas met in front of it. This girl on the right who has this sort of preternatural alertness and awareness, kind of like some kind of wisdom and alertness beyond her years and her place. And I think some of it derives from the I would have to say, the wisdom of our young subject. But our painting also has a life in the 20th century, because the picture our subject was depicted in more than 50 paintings by what some people would call the greatest European artist of the 20th century, Picasso. And of course, it was Picasso who considered Velasquez to be a painter's painter, and who studied and replicated his works in the Prado Museum in the 1950s. So here we have something in 1957 where our beautiful flaxen-haired girl has been reduced to this rather flattened shape. The dog really looks more like a dachshund. I mean, it's really quite an interesting adaptation. Quite a lot of drama for the Chamberlain in this black against white in the background. And there were individual paintings that he did of her in the 1960s. And we see her here with her hand on the chair. And you can still see the little rose decorations on the bracelets over there. Or she almost disappears in this kind of slightly out of focus medley of color. I think I have one more. Maybe that's easier to see. This is almost like Where's Waldo? I don't know if you can find her, but she's right. See her little face over there? And the king and queen you can hardly even make them out over here. Here's Velasquez with his very proud Order of Santiago and the bodyguard over here. Well, I guess my real point this evening is simply been to say that the picture that we have in the galleries that is here for you to drink from is a vessel that has fascinated artists from the kings and queens of France to the greatest artists of the 19th century and the greatest artists of the 20th century. And she is here for you from now through the end of September. So I hope you'll drink deeply and often from that well. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't. If anybody has a question or a comment or a criticism. Yes, ma'am. Right.
Get you on the microphone so everybody can hear.
The name of the painting that was copied so much that Picasso did so many times? The copy
Las Meninas, the Maids of Honor.
Las Meninas.
Yeah.
It's in the Prado.
Yes, it is worth a trip to Madrid to see that one painting. There's no question about it. Yes, ma'am.
Why was the gold leaf with her name on it taken off? Why? What was the point of that?
Well, I think the idea is that it was not the intention of the artist. And so I'll give you another example. Tastes change about the way works of art should be handled or revered or dealt with. So, for example, on the top floor of the Ancock's Chambers wing, there's a little bronze. It's about this big, and it's a Roman bronze. It was in the Bronze de la Couronne, the bronzes of the crown. And if you look carefully at this charming little boy, you'll see on the front of his toga is stamped a number. It's the inventory number for the bronzes. Now, we would never have a work of art where you stamp something like that on the front of it today, but at that point in time, that was all right. The idea of taking a painting and saying, let's say it's a portrait of a family member of yours, and saying, Aunt Susie, painting on top of it, might have seemed okay even if it was 100 years after and you weren't sure that the relatives would remember who it is. But 100 years after that, people might think, let's go back to the way it was when it was first painted. So that's my explanation. I'm sticking to it. There's a man in the back. Oh. Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying then that Velasquez did not paint her
No.
name on the top of
No,
it?
no,
Oh,
no.
that was added afterwards.
Yeah, that was the 18th
Okay.
century. That was 100 years later. Yeah.
I was struck by the way the painting is mounted in this exhibition and the juxtaposition between Margarita and the Murillo painting, and I wanted to know how that decision was made and just get you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting from, I think, it may give some insight into the sort of French perspective on it, and I'll circle back to your particular question, is that when you go to the Louvre, you can see paintings that are in the French school, then you can see paintings that are in the Italian school, and then you can see paintings that are in the Dutch school. But you can't usually see them together. So actually, for the director of the Louvre, or some of the curators of the Louvre, to see that gallery with the two Spanish paintings opposite two Italian paintings, the Guido Reni and the Pietro da Cortona, and the Rembrandt opposite the Raphael and now the Poussin, was great. It was very stimulating to them because it seems quite ordinary and regular and sensible to us, but it was, kind of thrilling from the French perspective. So in terms of the installation, we had a limited number of great pictures, and we tried to figure out a couple of sensible ways to place them. We knew we wanted, at least initially, we wanted the Raphael on axis, and it just worked out that the two Spanish paintings spoke to each other and balanced the two Italian paintings opposite it, if that's what you meant. It's a follow-up. It's a 12-part question. Yes, sir.
Well, I was particularly struck by the sort of class statement that was made by the richest of the rich, mounted next to the poorest of the poor.
Oh, I see what you mean.
In the same
I
country.
see. I didn't follow you. Yeah. Well, I don't think we were trying to. I mean, that wasn't our intention. We found that there were two great pictures, but yeah, that's a very good point, and.
So we can take one more question?
Yeah, I think there's some. Actually, there's
Okay.
one person who's seated in the balcony.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. I think what you're asking. Right. Yeah. So I think what you're asking is a comparison between these paintings of, as you say, passive, extremely wealthy, politically powerful figures by Velasquez with some of the later works of Goya about the tragedies of war and the sort of the sort of basic humanity and cruelty. So that is a tremendous, in a way it goes to my friend in the back row's comment. If you take the range between the Velasquez and the Murillo, the Murillo is closer in spirit to the late Goya than the Velasquez. However, from the pictorial sensibility, I think both Murillo and Velasquez derive from the incredible touch and restraint coloristically. I'm not talking about subject matter, but the extraordinary restraint and touch of Velasquez. So even though from a subject standpoint, Velasquez would seem to be worlds apart from the sort of grisly views of late Goya needs Velasquez to to get to that point as well. So that's my view. I would encourage you to do the great thing, which is to have an intimate experience with some of the treasures that are here from the Louvre. And I hope you'll come back very often. And don't forget, she's on the cover of our catalog. Thanks a lot. Bye. Mind if seems okay, even if it was 100 years after, and we weren't sure that the relatives would remember what it is. 100 years after that, people might think, let's go back to the way it was when it was first painted. So, that's my explanation. I'm sticking it in the
Are you saying that the Velasquez didn't? Are you saying the name of Velasquez did not add a name on the top of it? That was added afterwards.
No, that was the 18th century. That was 100 years later. Yeah.
I was struck by the way the painting is mounted in this exhibition and the juxtaposition between the Margarita and the Murillo painting, and I wanted to know how that decision was made a little bit. Get you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting from I think, it may give some insight into French, may give some insight into the sort of French perspective. I'll circle back to your to go to the Louvre. Is that when you go to the Louvre, you can see paintings that are in the French school, and you can see paintings that are in the Italian